Diddy denied bail. This has been a very interesting trial. We're now joined by Jay Carter, law professor, and also the host of the Black Lawyers podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today, especially finding out the verdict, everything that's been going on with the Diddy trial. So at this point, the latest is that he's been denied bail.
Yes.
So
yes.
Before we jump into that, let's just rewind a little bit. Diddy was found not guilty of the 3 severe charges, from my understanding, which is sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. Those charges were the heavy duty charges, right? That could have landed him behind prison for the rest of his life, but he was found not guilty of those. But he was found guilty of 2 lesser charges, the 2 prostitution related charges, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So let's just break it all down. How did the jury get to this verdict, right?
So it's interesting. When they said yesterday they had come back, and first of all, thank you for having me. Nessa and Hot 97. All I think about is Diddy's song Hot 97 every day. That's my word.
Right.
Benjamin. I think of his song when I think of you guys. But thank you for having me. I am a law professor. I'm the host of the Black Lawyers podcast. Nothing I'm saying is legal advice. This is for obviously education and entertainment purposes. I have to start with that disclaimer. But to break it down, yesterday when they came back and said, hey, we have 4 of the 5. I said, okay, this is what it's telling me. They found him not guilty either of both of transportation for prostitution and sex trafficking, or one or the other. And the reason why I knew that was because if they had found him guilty of both of those charges, then by default they would have had the RICO, because the RICO includes those 2. So I already knew coming in he was not guilty of something today. I knew that just based on what they said. So then it was like, okay, in terms of what he could be guilty of, it has to be the transportation of prostitution. And the reason why is I did sit in the trial off and on for the last couple of weeks. I did attend some of the hearings. And interesting enough, one of the hearings I attended, they actually put side by side text messages of Cassie arranging for the prostitutes to be flown across state lines, and then credit card receipts of them paying for the planes for them to come. And so what I think this should tell you, not that I'm encouraging anybody to commit any crimes on any level, that you have to use cash. Anytime you use a card, there is a paper trail. Now, something that's interesting about this argument, Ray J, Diddy's dear friend, one of his few friends that supported him throughout the trial, said, he told me earlier today, he said, well, Tasha, he said, with as it relates to Diddy using the credit card, I know you're saying that's a slam dunk, but I have a whole company where I have multiple cards on my account. It doesn't mean that every time I swipe the card. So it was a to me an argument I hadn't thought of, to be honest with you, until Ray J had said that. But
what was wait, hold on. So Jay, what was he saying in that point, just so that we can connect the dots to this case?
Because they are saying the reason why it was a slam dunk, beyond reasonable doubt, to find him guilty of the transportation for prostitution is because there are actual financial records that show him flying escorts across state lines to have sex, right? You have the text with Cassie setting up. You have the credit card statements with Bad Boy Enterprise paying for some of, not all, but some of the flights. And then you have the videos they showed in court of those same prostitutes having sex on video. So it's not like, oh, they came to strip or they came to have fun. No, we'll show the videos where they actually do the do. And so they presented all that evidence, very clean cut, very much in line. And it is a slam dunk. But what Ray J was saying is, well, you're saying that because the company credit card was used, that it was him, devil's advocate. It could have been anybody. It could have been Cassie. It could have been his chief of staff. It could have been anybody that swiped the credit card. I do think that was kind of enough for them to be like, you know what? This is more likely than not him. We got to give them something. Let's just give the lesser charge. We're not going to sentence him for life and keep him away from his family. Let's just go with something that's kind of clean where we can argue it.
Got it.
I don't think they could cleanly argue beyond a reasonable doubt RICO from the beginning. And I never thought they could cleanly argue sex trafficking. The strongest piece of sex trafficking evidence they had was the tape of Cassie. Jane Doe was the worst witness for the prosecution. They should have never had her. They should
Wait,
have
why?
never her.
Wait, hold on. Break it down. Why?
Yeah. So just rewinding. So we just talked about transportation of prostitution and why that was a slam dunk.
Right.
Let's talk about why the other two charges were not a slam dunk.
Okay.
Starting with sex trafficking.
Okay.
Sex trafficking was not a slam dunk. And again, you need a slam dunk for federal criminal trials. It has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, right? You have to get all 12 jurors to say yes. That was not going to happen because the strongest piece of evidence they had was Cassie in particular and the tape of it appearing her trying to leave a freak off and him by force physically trying to bring her back in.
Now, are you talking about the abuse that we saw on the video that got leaked from the hotel?
That was the strongest piece of evidence, plus her testimony. But her testimony plus that video, to me, that was the strongest piece of evidence they had. What happened was it got watered down when Jane came into the picture. Because Jane constantly was like, I still care for him. He's still paying my lawyer bill to this day. He's still paying my rent. I signed a love contract. I consensually agreed to do these things as long as he paid my rent. It was too much of a consensual testimony for it to be sex trafficking. So I actually think Jane Doe's testimony hurt the strength of the Cassie testimony. And this is why they decided these were boyfriend-girlfriend relationships with domestic violence. They're not going to ignore the domestic violence. But the sexual stuff was, for the most part, consensual. And so they threw it out. It was not, it was never going to reach that threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, moving on to the RICO, remember, and I have my little notes because I took notes throughout the trial, but they had...
And the RICO charge is considered one of the severe charges that he was found.
You serve life. You serve life. You
can serve life. He was found not guilty for that.
Not guilty.
So break it down. Okay.
And again, he was also found not guilty of the sex trafficking charge. That's why allegedly they're saying Cassie's pissed because he was actually found not guilty as it relates to the charge, as it relates to her. So as it relates to the RICO says you only have to be found guilty of 2 predicate acts or crimes in a 10-year period. So the minute you find 2, you have your RICO. So we already know they found transportation for prostitution. We know that they found that. So all they needed was one more for that RICO. So let me read the other ones. Kidnapping, arson, bribery, witness tampering, forced labor, sex trafficking, and drug distribution. So what this tells me, them finding him not guilty on RICO, the jury didn't buy any of that. They didn't buy the arson. They didn't buy the bribery. They didn't buy the witness tampering. Because if they had bought any of it, they could have easily just said, oh, that's the second one. Bam. Here's the RICO. So all that evidence they presented of Kid Cudi's car and the assistant saying that she was forced to get in a car to go to Kid Cudi's car, or forced to not leave the place, like all the kidnapping and arson stuff that they tried to present, even the forced labor. They said, oh, well, Capricorn Clark worked overtime. It was never paid.
And give us a little, just a beat on who Capricorn Clark is in this case.
So Capricorn Clark supported their kidnapping and forced labor charge. So when you're trying to prove something, you say, okay, what evidence or what testimony can I have to support what I'm saying? So she supported their kidnapping and forced labor.
And now she worked with Diddy. That's who she is in the grand scheme of things.
In the industry, everyone knows who Capricorn Clark is. She was a long-term assistant of his. And she said that, obviously he was like emotionally abusive, but he also overworked her, forced her into a hostile working environment because she saw what was allegedly happening, obviously, to Cassie. And that in one incident in particular, she was forced to get in the car and go to Kid Cudi's house, and allegedly, go into the house, and later the car was burned. And so they tried to tie her not getting paid for overtime as the forced labor, and Diddy's treatment of her also is kidnapping to just justify those charges. But it just wasn't very strong. It's not that they didn't present it. It just wasn't strong. So do understand that it couldn't have been one. It had to be 2 of the predicate acts. They only found 1. And so that's why the RICO was never going to go anywhere. Also, you have to keep in mind, they tried their best to show that Bad Boys Enterprises, like Irv Gotti's Murder Inc., like YSL's Young Thug, these prosecutors come in and say, these record labels are criminal enterprises. That is the argument they always make. And these are all the criminal acts that not just they commit, but they commit with their staff. So the way that in this Diddy trial, they tried to show it was a criminal enterprise, they would always put Diddy's picture up in the middle on the stand, and then they would show his chief of staff, or they would show his bodyguard. They tried to make it seem like it wasn't just Diddy. Because you have to keep in mind, even if Diddy did all of this stuff, it's not a RICO. It's not a RICO if he does it by himself. He has to do it in concert with others. That is what makes it a criminal enterprise. And again, the prosecution did try to show that others worked with him, but the argument can always be made, well, they didn't know what he was, just because you put baby oil in the room, you don't know that a prostitute is coming, or just because you're cleaning up and you see something, like, you can always make the argument, did they really know? So were they really knowingly conspiring with him to commit crimes or help commit crimes with people? Again, there's a case of reasonable doubt there, and therefore that's why you don't have the RICO.
Got it. Now, for a lot of people, I see there's like a lot of confusion online, right? When they're thinking of this case, this was a federal case, correct?
Correct.
So when people are trying to connect Cassie's settlement with Diddy, and then why was she on the stand? Can you unpack that so that there's clarity?
Okay. So this is where Cassie comes into place. Two things. Number one, she was a witness for the prosecution, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Okay? If she did not testify, she would be in jail. Because you have to remember, she also participated in the transportation of prostitution.
Wow.
She's just as guilty as he is on that verdict. So if she did not testify, she would have been charged. She would have been found guilty right along with him. So she had to. There was no choice. So I know people said, oh, she got her money. Why she testified? Because she would have gone to prison. She would have gone.
Is that like the law?
Yeah, that's the law. If you do not testify and we know that you've committed a crime, we will charge you too. And if you have been found guilty, we will then put you also in prison. So this was a way for her, A, to get immunity. Two, the federal case was built on Cassie's civil lawsuit. So that's the second way we bring in Cassie. If there was no Cassie civil lawsuit, we would not be talking today, Nessa. There would be no case. They used the groundwork of her lawsuit and said, let's read through this civil lawsuit and let's see what things could be federal crimes. The minute Cassie threw in, oh, well, prostitutes were flown in. Ding, 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 ding. Red light went off. Federal prosecutor said, transportation of prostitution. They literally went through her civil case and said, what can we pull out of the civil case and make it federal? And
who's they? And who's they in this? When you say
prosecutors,
the prosecutors,
the district attorneys in New York went through her lawsuit to figure out what could be turned criminal. And this is the nuance I do want to leave with your audience. Is exactly what we're talking about. This is why this is such a huge win, not just for Diddy, but for any future entertainer. Right now, there is a pending civil lawsuit against Tyler Perry. Right? Tyler Perry.
That's right.
And there's some other entertainers getting ready to get big civil lawsuits. So why is this a Diddy win and a win for entertainers, but in particular Black entertainers? Because it shows the prosecutors, if you're going to, moving forward, try to take down Black billionaires and their empires and their businesses under RICO, if that's what you're trying to do, you better come with a solid case. Otherwise, you're not going to get your conviction. So yes, this is a Diddy win, but this is a win for any other entertainer that the federal prosecutors are looking at right now to bring federal charges. They could try to bring federal charges against Tyler Perry, just like they could have tried to bring federal charges against Jay-Z. He got out of his civil lawsuit, but this is why this is such a big deal. The last person to get out of a RICO in New York was Irv Gotti, rest his soul. And then in Georgia, we have obviously, on the state level, with the RICO, we had Young Thug. So there's some entertainers that have escaped, but typically you don't escape. Once the prosecution has decided to prosecute you, you don't escape. And so not only is he not serving life in jail, Diddy's case now sets the precedent for anything else that they try to bring him for.
Oh, so this is interesting.
Yeah, this is why this is super important. Yeah, this is a win for Diddy, but this is a win for our Black billionaires who are being forced to come into federal court on, as far as I'm concerned, things that are really state charges. Because here's the thing, I'm all about holding people accountable. If Cassie or one of the hotel people had called the police on Diddy after he assaulted her in 2016, then he would have had a trial with the assault, and that would have gone through, right? But the problem is we're not holding people accountable on the state level. We're not. And then the statute of limitations comes around, and then you can't hold them accountable. So what's left? A civil lawsuit. Because people say, well, why didn't Cassie call the police? Well, it's too late for her to call the police. Right. The only thing she can truly do now is file a civil lawsuit. She got her $10 million for him. She got $10 million from the hotel. So she walks away with $20 million as her resolve, because she cannot on the state level bring anything against Diddy at this point.
Can you explain the difference between civil lawsuit and a federal lawsuit?
Mm-hmm. So civil is money. Just always remember, civil is money. You can't go to jail for civil lawsuit. This is why Diddy, up until his arrest, was still doing freak-offs, because it was like, oh, these people are just civilly coming after me. There are no criminal charges on the state and federal level. I'm fine. But the minute you bring in a criminal proceeding, you can go to jail. And this is why this is very scary for Diddy and his family.
Wow. Okay. Were you surprised by the verdict today, with your experience and understanding cases and your law background? Were you shocked at all?
No. I think the jury got it right.
Wow.
I think the jury got it right. I think beyond a reasonable doubt for the transportation and prostitution. If you're going to come to a guilty verdict, that is the only thing I could say that was fair. If they came back with a RICO, I would have said it was unfair. If they came back with a sex trafficking, I want to say sex trafficking, I was 50-50, because I do think they presented a strong case with Cassie. So I was 50-50 on that one. But for them to come back and say, hey, guilty for transportation and prostitution, I think they let out enough evidence to show that Diddy was connected to bringing people across state lines for sex. I think they did a really good job with that. And so I think that was fair. Now, what's next? We've got sentencing, right? And you get 10 years, up to 10 years for each of those prostitution charges. Up to means you don't necessarily have to get it. Up to could be 90 days. It could be 60 days. It could be time served. It could be probation. So he could get a mix of a sentencing like Young Thug. Young Thug did not have to spend any more time in jail. He got time served for the time he already spent waiting for his trial, and he got probation. Right? And I think some community service. So you can get a hybrid sentencing that does not require you to actually sit in jail. So I'm sure Diddy at this point is hoping for that. I do think if he gets any significant jail time, he will go for that pardon with Trump. I do think that's when he'll go for the pardon angle. I don't think he's going to do that right away, because he may not even get any jail time.
Sure.
Right.
Why did the judge deny Diddy's bail?
So the argument of Cassie, because Cassie's lawyer wrote a letter today. So this was kind of quick. I thought this wouldn't happen until tomorrow. So the prosecutors and the victims were allowed to write in letters saying why Diddy should stay in jail until sentencing. So both Cassie and the prosecutor said that he was a threat to both the public and to the victim, that they would be in danger if he's out. And then the second argument that the prosecutors made was that he could commit more crimes while he's out. I didn't necessarily really buy either one of those, but the judge did. And I think the judge it was almost like he was trying to appease both Diddy and the victims, right? I don't think he wanted to completely slap the victims in the face by allowing him to just walk out free today until the sentencing. And so I think he erred on the side of not doing that. But I also think he could have equally just let him go home today, because at the end of the day, he's still guilty. Even if you let him home today, he's still guilty. It's not like he's walking out on a not guilty charge.
Correct.
And so, so if you want to ask what I'm surprised about, I'm not surprised about the verdict. I am surprised that Diddy is not allowed to wait at home while he waits for sentencing. That is what I'm surprised about.
Give me your guess. When will we find out about the sentencing?
Couple of weeks.
Really?
Couple of weeks.
Why does it take that long? Just curious.
Well, because it's a brand new hearing. They have to set it. They have to schedule it. I'm sure they're going to try to expedite it, but no, it's not going to be like tomorrow. It may not even be next week. It could be a couple of weeks before we have an actual sentencing hearing. You also have to remember the judge has to collect everything. So now anybody that's Diddy's friend can write in a letter for him. So all your celebrity friends and even your non-celebrity friends, your family, anybody gets to write a letter and tell the judge, please, 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 we understand you found him guilty. Please, give him the least amount of, time as possible, or don't give him any time at all. So there has to be time set aside to receive those letters and review everything. Also keep in mind a nuance that your audience may not recognize. The jury only made the verdict. They don't do the sentencing. The judge does. And guess what? Allegedly, and again, this is just based on my personal experience watching it, the judge seems to like Diddy.
Wow.
He seems to like him. So
what gives you that impression, since you've been in the courthouse?
I've never seen, even on the state side, judge be so endearing to a defendant. How are you feeling? How are you doing? What's going on? It's very conversational. I've just never seen a judge act that way with the defendant. I think he likes him. I think he liked to see that his family came in to support him. And again, I'm not saying because he likes him, he's just going to completely say no jail time. He still may give him a little jail time. But what I'm saying is, it is a plus that it appears that the judge likes it. It's
for
not
sure,
because the jury does not decide the sentencing. The judge does. The judge does.
Wow. So would you consider this a big win for Diddy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is a win for him. And like I said, this is a win for our Black billionaires. This is a win for the entertainment industry, no matter what race you are. You got to remember, even if you are a white entertainer, right? You have Harvey Weinstein, you have other entertainers, other people in entertainment that have come against federal courts. This is a win because it shows prosecutors don't inappropriately bring RICO where there really is no RICO. Don't try to, I always said this case was like putting a square in a circle peg.
Wow.
It never really was a federal case. They had to make it a federal case. And I don't like that. Why are you going out of your way to make it? If it truly is a federal case, then right on the surface, it's a federal case. You don't have to try to make facts and turn things a certain way. To me, they tried too hard to make this a federal case, and that's why it never sat well with me. Some people say that makes me Team Diddy. I am not Team Diddy. I like his songs. I think he has a very nice family, but I am not Team Diddy. I am Team Fairness. I am Team Justice. And I don't want to see anybody, Black, white, Asian, Spanish, Native American, I don't want to see anybody in federal court on federal charges if it's truly a state case. And that's what I stand by. This was a state case, not a federal case.
Is it possible Diddy will not get any time?
Yes, that is a possibility.
Wow.
So as I mentioned before, he can get time served. He can get probate. He can get what I call the Young Thug package, the YSL package. As you can see, Young Thug did not serve any more time behind bars. He got this. And I'm not saying it's a great package, because to me, you should not be on probation for 20 years. That means you're walking on eggshell. To me, it's a bad deal, even though he took it, but it allowed him to come home and not be in jail. So I think at this point, Diddy will take anything that allows him to not set another day in jail. Will he be offered it by the judge? I don't know. But to answer your question, yes. In a technical sense, especially because he is a first-time offender, right? He's a first-time offender. This is the first time this has happened.
Right.
Technically, yes. He could, at the sentencing hearing, walk away and not spend another day in jail.
I think also a good reminder is that, the abuse that we saw on the tape with Diddy, what he did to Cassie, I mean, he was beating her. It was very violent. This current trial that just wrapped up was not a domestic violence trial, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, from what I'm gathering, I think that's what makes it hard, is that tape exists. We all saw it. And then it appears that Diddy was able to, yes, he's found guilty, but he was able to, I guess, make the system work for him, right?
But remember, he made the system, to be honest, he didn't make the system work for him. The system did this to themselves. If you bring the incorrect charges, you will not get a conviction. Because, to be honest, he didn't want any charges. Whether it be the correct charges or not, he didn't want to be charged at all.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I'm sorry, the feds did this to themselves. They overreached. They added RICO and sex trafficking because they really wanted to throw the book at him. If they had just come in just with transportation or prostitution and only focused on that, the trial would have been shorter. The evidence would have been more clean cut. We wouldn't have had to sit through long videos of freak offs. You wouldn't have had to even watch the casting video. All that would have been left out. They could have just showed casting setting up the freak offs, the people being flown in, the cards being used, and that would have been it. And that would have been their slam dunk. And I don't think there would have been as much pushback if what happened today if this was the only charge. I think people are angry. And again, this is a bigger conversation. The bigger conversation is Black billionaires are being targeted, because you also have to remember why he may still be Diddy bopping for the next couple of weeks. Some people saying, why is he so happy? You have to remember, if he had been found guilty of the RICO, his $400 million fortune that they already tallied up was going to be transferred to the government. So some of the properties and monies, even some of the properties in his mom's name and his kids' names. So you have to understand, this is why he is like, okay, no, I don't want to be found guilty of anything, but I'm not losing $400 million. I'm not going to jail for the rest of my life. So when you ask me, is this a win for Diddy? Absolutely. He's not losing his money and he's not going to jail for life. He won today. He won today. Even with a guilty charge, he won today.
I was going to say, Diddy won even though he was found guilty on charges.
He won today. He won today. And this is why his kids weren't 100% happy, because they know it's up to the 20 years, the 10 on each. But I think they were happy because they knew, A, he was not found guilty of serious charges, but also you have to remember Diddy is their bank. These kids don't have jobs. These children's moms, they don't have jobs. He is their bank. If all that money goes, what would they do? So this was also protecting their interests too. This is why they're happy. They love their father. They're there to support him, obviously.
Of course, right.
But they were also protecting, like, hey, we're standing up also for our financial interests. If he's found guilty of RICO, all of our money goes away. So this is a win. Win for Diddy, win for the Combs family, for sure.
What about the public court of opinion?
The public court of opinion, even before the criminal charges came down, happened when we saw the tape.
That's right.
So I think we're in the same exact place. The only way I will say it's a little bit better is that people say, well, why? I think it's disgusting that what he did on camera, or probably off camera, to Cassie and these other people, shouldn't have happened. I think the public opinion turned a little bit more in his favor when they saw that this was bigger than just this domestic violence case. This was about taking a Black billionaire's money. This was about bringing him on federal charges where it was really a state case. I think when you start to show that someone is kind of a victim in something, and I know that's ironic to call him a victim, but he started to look like a victim to the feds. Like, he was being inappropriately charged. His money was getting ready to be taken away. He was ready to be taken to prison for the rest of his life around his family. He started to sort of look like a victim. And so that's when the public opinion started to turn a little bit. So we're always going to have, it's awful that he beat women. It's awful that he forced people to do things.
Of course.
No one can ever say that. With or without the tape, we heard the rumors, right?
Right.
So I don't think anyone's going to ever agree that what he did was right on the domestic side.
Of course.
But I think what people are saying is, we want to protect our Black men. We want to protect our Black successful men. And if you're going to get them on the right stuff. Don't get them on the wrong stuff. And I think that's where the majority of the public opinion stands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think this will hurt his career moving forward?
Yes and no. I definitely think he may have a baby oil endorsement in his near
my
future.
Goodness. That would.
People don't like to joke about that, but I say that to say that
that would be insane.
Has always been a brand,
right?
And so I think if anybody is going to rebrand himself and repivot, he is the master of doing that. Why do you think his name has changed so many times?
Right. Mm-hmm.
He's gone from Sean Combs to
P.
Puff,
Diddy
to Puff Daddy,
Love
to
to
P.
this,
Diddy, to Diddy to Love. He is the master of rebranding. So I think no, in the sense that he knows how to rebrand himself, but yes, because that tape for the rest of his life will be out there. And his children will always see that tape. His grandchildren will see. The world will always see that tape. And so that is why
that's right.
This will continue to hurt him at some level. Yeah.
Ultimately, final thoughts. The prosecutors, fumbled. Why?
The prosecutors fumbled because they presented federal charges with evidence that did not support beyond a reasonable doubt that those federal charges actually happened. Mm-hmm. So in the case of RICO and sex trafficking, you brought these two federal charges, but the evidence you presented did not convince the jury. Again, maybe it convinced them a little bit, but remember, the standard isn't convincing a little bit. The standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. And in fact, the jury is always instructed, even if you have 1% doubt, you are not allowed to convict this person. They actually say it. You are not allowed to convict this person, even if you have 1% reasonable doubt. So at the end of the day, they fumbled by bringing charges that they truly could not bring evidence to support beyond a reasonable doubt.
Can he be retried in any other way, brought to court by other people in the future?
On the civil side, yes, because two lawsuits just dropped. One with a man, one with a woman. So yeah, the civil can continue to go on. But again, that's money. That's not you going to jail. And at some point, his insurance policy and his bank account is going to go, there's only so much money. But on the criminal side, to answer your question, no, it's called double jeopardy. Now, if it had been a hung trial, so if they had come back hung on sex trafficking or RICO, yes, the prosecution has the right to retry the case. But it did not come back hung. It came back not guilty. Whew. So there's no more trying Diddy on those charges. He can breathe easy. He can breathe easy.
Wow. Jay Carter, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, enlightening all of us and giving us clarity on the Diddy trial and what is to, come at this point and what this means moving forward. Incredible law professor. You're also the host of the Black Lawyers podcast.
Yes,
where can people follow you and just stay up to date, because you cover so many cases?
Yes, so many cases. So if you search up the Black Lawyers podcast on any social media platform, you'll find us. But also our website is theblacklawyers.com. You can find us there. So we have obviously the episodes of our guests. We've had some awesome guests. So who we interview on our podcast are Black lawyers, celebrity advocates, politicians, anyone in the law. So you don't just have to be a lawyer. So for example, we've interviewed Kerry Washington. We've interviewed Hill Harper. They are not licensed, obviously, attorneys. They play, some of them play lawyers on TV, but they're not real lawyers, but they're advocates, right? Kerry loves voting. That's her big thing. So we interview celebrity advocates, but we also do politicians. We've had Jasmine Crockett on twice. We've had big lawyers like Ben Crump and Sunny Hostin from The View and Rachel Lindsay from The Bachelor and Ebony K. Williams, who is amazing. Mm-hmm. So yes, we have a good mix of lawyers, politicians, celebrity advocates, and law students that come onto the podcast with their topics. We just finished we just entered our mid-season break. Luckily, it was right after everything happened. So we will be returning in the fall, but also check out the site because we have a free lawyer directory. So if you're looking for a lawyer, we have a free lawyer directory. We have resources for students. We have a scholarship we give to Black law students.
I love this.
So it's a lawyer directory. It's the scholarship. It's the episodes, and then most importantly, we have amazing merch. We have merch with Alabama Brawl. We have Black empowerment merch. We have the Black lawyers with Kerry Washington and all the Black lawyers from Insecure and Girlfriends. We have all that merch. So check out the merch. The Black TV Lawyer merch actually supports the scholarship. So every time you buy something from the Black TV Lawyer, you're helping with the student. And so, check out the merch, check out the episodes, check out the lawyer directory and our legal resources on this site. We are about empowering the community to have more access to the law. That's the whole point of the platform and the podcast. And so we just appreciate you having us on today. And obviously, in a couple of weeks, there'll be some sentencing. Maybe we can come back and chat a little bit more.
Yes, we need you to come back and update us on what that all means. There will be a part 2 to this.
Yeah, part 2 to this. For now, I think everybody can just enjoy the holiday and take a little break because I think this has just been consuming everybody's every day, just, waiting for the trial to be over, waiting for the verdict. It's just been consuming. So it is good that everybody gets a little break before the sentencing. And yes, thank you so much for having us
Of
here again.
course.
Really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.